I double down on this. Just like Becky Hammond said, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Double down. Absolutely double down. Getting out of the East has never been a surefire to winning a championship. What y'all talking about? You get out of the East, you're supposed to get out of the East. It's the East. Of course you're supposed to get out of the East. That don't just mean you win a championship because you get out of the East. It's the East.
Okay. Janae, I'll let you go first here. Do you have a bigger issue with Brunson's comments or the East as a whole? Or I should say Dre's comments on Brunson or the East as a whole?
I have a bigger issue with Dre's comments on Brunson. We know the East is a relatively, weaker conference, but overall, I don't like his tone in that because it's not what you do, it's how you do it. You can only play the opponent that's right in front of you. The New York Knicks swept 2 series. Yes, it is a relatively weaker conference, but how they handled going through that, they manhandled their opponents. To me, that is more impressive. And now getting to Jalen Brunson, I don't know, Perk, Stephen A., I don't know if you guys watch Game of Thrones. Jalen Brunson is the prince that was promised. And if you watch the show, it's a guy that's underestimated. There's this long winter. There's this long drought. And he's bringing them back to the pinnacle. First NBA Finals since 1999. And if I told you that there's a certain player that averages 26 points per game. There's a certain player currently, right? There's a certain player that 4 years ago, as a member of the Dallas Mavericks, he only averaged 12. He goes to the biggest market in the world in New York City and drops 26. Doubles, more than doubles his average, 26. Also, when it comes to postseason, talking about elevating your game, wouldn't you want a player that increases his postseason average by over 6 points per game? That's most amongst any player qualified in the postseason. And so I think we are sort of looking at Jalen Brunson and looking at the phenotype, looking at 6'2", 6'3", and judging him, but not necessarily, we should be judging him more so on the results that he produces and not what he looks like. Perk, you call him Big Body Brunson for a reason. So I disagree on both ends with Draymond Green, but I do think that the Knicks, they deserve every reason to be in the NBA Finals, and we should not be diminishing that.
Bunch of nonsense from Draymond Green. I'm going to just keep it a buck. Didn't last year a Eastern Conference team in the Indiana Pacers take the Oklahoma City Thunder to 7 games, and one could argue that if their best player in Tyrese Halliburton didn't get hurt, it looked like the momentum was swinging more for Indiana to win that game before he went out from far as tearing his Achilles. That's number one. Didn't this Western Conference, Anthony Edwards was banged up, both legs, no Luka Doncic. So we can stop with the comparing of the conferences. It's competition out there, right? The Knicks handled their business. But I'm so tired of people disrespecting Jalen Brunson and what he's doing right now. Right now, he's a proven 1A. Whether he completes the mission or not, getting to the promised land is enough to prove that you're a 1A scorer in this league in the history of the game. We're never going to sit up here and say Allen Iverson wasn't a 1A option, and he got his Philadelphia 76ers team to the promised land but didn't complete the mission. We're not going to sit up here and say that Charles Barkley wasn't a 1A when he had to face Jordan when he was with the Phoenix Suns, and we damn sure know that he was when he lost to Jordan in the Chicago Bulls. So again, what are we talking about here? And one could argue and say, hey, Steph Curry didn't prove he was a 1A until he actually won his 4th NBA championship and finals MVP. That's why Draymond Green, when they lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he was in the car crying to bring Kevin Durant over. If you had that much confidence in Steph Curry to be a 1A along with Klay Thompson, there's no way in hell that you go in the car begging for KD to come sign to be a Golden State Warrior, which, by the way, helped them get their 2nd and 3rd championship. I'm not sitting up here taking away from Steph Curry. Not at all. I got him as the top 10 greatest player of all time. But if we're going to keep that energy for Jalen Brunson, we have to keep that same energy for Stephen Curry. I just don't believe in that. Getting to the promised land, to the NBA Finals, is enough for me for a guy like Jalen Brunson to be considered a 1A option in this league.
Well, I agree with most of what both of y'all said, especially his comments about the Eastern Conference, because there was a lot of stuff that happened in the West with injuries and what have you, where the road to prosperity wasn't as difficult as one might have thought. Houston didn't have a point guard. Luka Doncic didn't play. Anthony Edwards was hobbled. Dante DiVincenzo, even though he's not on those guys' levels, was out. That would have helped Minnesota as well. There's a plethora of things that transpired that assisted in OKC and San Antonio being where they were. So I don't agree with him about the East. But what I will say to you is this. I'm not taking his comments as being disrespectful to Jalen Brunson to the degree that y'all are. I'm taking his comments as backing up the great Becky Hammon, who, by the way, just for the world to remember, I've often said this statement. If men can coach in the WNBA, a woman should be coaching in the NBA as a head coach. And if a woman was in position to get a head coaching job, my first choice would be Becky Hammon, who I believe is a phenomenal coach. 3 championships in 5 years in Vegas, Summer League championship coach in the men for San Antonio before she got the WNBA job. The woman is a spectacular coach, and she knows her damn basketball. And so when she speaks, we should listen, okay? And Draymond piggybacking off of her comments to support that is how I took that. Now let me say this. For Draymond, without realizing it, when you talked about him clamoring for KD when they had lost in the finals because he recognized that Steph Curry may not have been enough with LeBron having Kyrie and Kevin Love and those boys, and they were coming. Having won that championship, erasing a 52-year curse for Cleveland, and then Golden State goes out and they get Kevin Durant. That's actually making Draymond's point, because having the greatest shooter God ever created, who you have as a top 10 player of all time, who somebody is looking at as the greatest point guard we've ever seen in NBA history, not quintessential, but a different type of point guard than Steph Curry. The fact is, Draymond Green was acknowledging at that moment that wasn't going to be enough. So whether we agree or disagree, his position is consistent from the standpoint that if you're relatively undersized, he has to see it to believe it, because playing in the land of giants, the likelihood is that you're not going to be able to get it done. You also brought up Allen Iverson. Of course, we'll look at him as a 1A, okay? And I don't think there's a conversation about Jalen Brunson being a 1A, because everybody can't be 6 foot, 6'7", or whatever. I definitely agree with you about him being a 1A. But in the same breath, what was Becky Hammon saying? A guard that size is somebody she questions whether or not they can lead you to a championship because of the land of giants. Allen Iverson, who covered him for the first 10 years of his career, who covered him every day, every game, every practice. That would be me. And I'm telling you right now, if it wasn't for that damn Shaq, and I understand Kobe was becoming that dude, but he wasn't there yet. Shaq was in his prime. And when they asked me going into that NBA Finals, I said, I became famous that day because I said, Shaq, and more Shaq. And then they said, are you saying that the 76ers are going to get swept? I said, oh, no. AI will get you one. He'll get you one. And he dropped 48 in game one. And then I said, but on this date, at the Wachovia Center at the time in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Los Angeles Lakers will be crowned as champions yet again. And you had people protesting, like literally writing into the Philadelphia Inquirer and trying to get me fired because they were so pissed off that I said what I said. But I meant it, and I was 1,000% correct because the diesel was there. And no matter how great Allen Iverson was, there was no answer for the diesel. When you have that kind of size, it's not a crime for somebody to look at you at 6'1" and say, you're great, you're phenomenal, but God didn't bless you with 10 to 14 extra inches of height like they got with these people. And that's the reality. That's what Becky Hammon's looking at. That's what Draymond Green is looking at. And we could disagree about it, but it's not a crime for them to say it, and it's not disrespectful to Jalen Brunson.
Well, my thing is, it's disrespectful to downplay just getting to the NBA Finals. If you're a guy and you get to the NBA Finals, That's an accomplishment in itself. And that's enough for me because a lot of guys throughout their playoff career don't even sniff the playoffs, let alone get into the NBA Finals. That's the point that I'm making. You could get your team to the NBA Finals and you got a stamp from me as being a 1A level, a 1A type player that's, that led your team to the NBA Finals. That's enough for me.